Welcome back to another episode of our 2024 Masterclass series. This series is the brainchild of Italians in VC and Made It podcast and powered by BCG and Bitsplace. And the theme of today's Masterclass is it still possible to build a global consumer brand? And we are here today with Elio Leoni Sceti. Elio, welcome to the Masterclass.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Just a little bit of background about you. You have over 30 years experience in the consumer goods and media sector. You're the co-founder of the Craftory, the first investment house for mission-driven challenger brands in consumer goods. Founded in early 2018 by you and Ernesto Schmitt, the Craftory is a $550 million global investment house focused exclusively on investing in responsible consumer packaged goods. Consumer packaged goods brand at growth stages, and you've invested in brands such as Seed, Who Gives a Crap, All Plants, and Edgard and Cooper, so some really, really huge big brand names. You were formerly the CEO of Iglo Birdseye until June 2015, where you oversaw the sale to Nomad Foods. And previously, you were CEO of EMI Music from 2008 to 2010, and earlier held senior leadership roles first at Procter Gamble and then at Reckitt Benckiser, where you served as CMO, global head of innovation, and then head of the European operations. So really incredible experience in the CPG category. We're really excited to have you here and talk about all things consumer. I just want to remind everyone that you have the opportunity to ask Elio questions. So please write them down. Don't be shy. As we go on the conversation, write them down on the chat, and then we'll leave the last 15 minutes of the sessions to answer your questions. I also want to mention that some of you have already inserted your questions on the Luma invite, and we've made sure to also include some of those. So let's get started. And the title of this masterclass is it still possible to build a global consumer brand? Because it seems it's getting harder and harder for consumer businesses to really establish themselves if behind there's not like a celebrity or influencer type person these days. And also few VCs seem to be interested in investing in this sector. So really curious to talk about it with you, Elio. Let's dive in. In today's saturated market, do you believe it's still possible to build a global consumer brand from scratch, especially as I just mentioned, if you're not a celebrity or a big influencer?
Absolutely. The answer is yes. Building consumers is the most timeless of things, has happened for centuries. If you think about Frederick Barbarossa, Red Bird, 12th century, he was a brand. Einstein with his crazy hair is a brand. The same way that Red Bull is a brand for the energy that it provides, et cetera, et cetera. So brands really are a way for consumers to recognize something which is relevant to them, distinctive, like the Red Bird could have been at that time, and that is meaningful. And so as long as there is a consumer, there is an idea, and that idea is relevant to that group of consumers, there is the opportunity for a brand to be created. So can you do that? 100%. Now, 1,000 years ago, and 1,000 years from now. The thing that happened that, you're saying fewer VCs are interested in consumers, or, there is this sort of different ways of communicating with people, influencers and celebrities. They're just fads, right? So the consumer investor that were investing in consumers in the last 5 years were, investors that had capital to deploy. They had done tech and other things for a long time. They saw that there was an opportunity because of the TikTok, influencer, celebrity, whatever, to get into the market. They got in, they paid wrong amounts, they got burned, and they got out. So, basically what happened is that there is a screening, and what remains is expert consumer investors like the Craftories and a few others that understand how to build a consumer brand and see the value, actually probably even better now because you can have that value at some compressed multiples. So the opportunities is definitely there.
Okay, that's really encouraging, and I think what everybody wants to hear in this masterclass. And what would you say are some of the key factors that contribute to the success of new global brands? Like if you were to build a brand today.
So the brands are in a way, a sets of values that represent a desire or a need that consumer associate with a product. And that wrapper is called the brand. So how you build it is, first of all, by creating a brand that can have power. And power can be achieved if you have saliency, relevancy, and meaningfulness. And so you need to create a brand that is both from a brand representation, so from equity assets perspective, as well as from a product perspective. So it has to be better at something. In consumer goods, you got to be better at PCV, performance, convenience, or value. It either cleans better, or it's easier to use, or at parity convenience is cheaper. You know, if you're not better at one of these three things, the product will not have that uniqueness that is required in order to stick. So you need to have a brand representation that is memorable. You need to have a product that is superior, and you need to have margin. And this is like the most important line in the P&L is margin, because without margins, you have no fuel for growth in marketing or sales. And without fuels for growth, there is no growth. And if there is no growth, there is no brand. So, you know, the margins is way more than just one KPIs, is the vital KPIs, which in consumer goods doesn't really improve with scale the same way that it does in tech and other, you know, sectors. So if you have a bad gross margin at start, you're dead. So, you know, it's as simple as that. And that's a simple truth that not many investors that are not consumer expert understand. So you see some of the brands that went public and, you know, over moments of hype, then collapsed. And the reason is that their, you know, gross margin was like single digits or something like that, which clearly doesn't allow for this to happen. So his brand, his product, his margin. And then the other two things that are obvious is, of course, the founding team and or the leadership. Is the people that make success. So, you know, the founding team needs to have qualities of vision, resiliency, and capacity to recruit the right people that can continue on the positive journey. That's absolutely fundamental. And then the other one, and the final, is that ideally you want to be in a sector that has endemic and secular growth. So it's much easier to build a brand in pet care now, or in, you know, women wellness, or in, you know, better nutrition, you know, things that are, you know, already going. And so you swim with the river. It's much easier to build a brand swimming with the river than against. Those would be my five sort of point of reference.
Those are actually incredible like tips, especially the three you mentioned at the beginning. Like, you know, you have to have one of those three things: the either the convenience or superiority, and asking you a bit of a further question on margin, because obviously when you're starting out, margins, you know, as you know, you're hoping your margins get better as volume of your product, you know, there's more volume. So if you start with a negative margin, like, you shouldn't be starting, or like, what's your take on that? Like, it should be profitable from day one, at least, the product.
You shouldn't. In consumer goods, you must think that you are not going to have economies of scale that are more than maybe 15-20% of your cost of goods. It's called fast-moving consumer goods because there are a lot of things that moves very fast off the shelf. So the unit price tends to be small. You know, we're talking about stuff that costs, you know, $10, $5, $15. We're not thinking about 200. So if in that, you know, $10, pick a number, your cost of good is not engineered to allow for a positive gross margin, you will never get there. So you need to have at least a gross margin that, once, you know, be benefiting from the economies of scale with 15-20%, you know, benefit, will be at the top of the category in which you can compete. It's not just having a good gross margin. You got a target to have it at the top of the category range in which you compete. Otherwise, other people would be able to spend more money than you, and that's never a good place to be.
And how crucial do you think is having like a mission-driven brand in today's consumer landscape? And how do you think it can contribute to a brand global success? It seems like, you know, everyone's kind of going in that direction. Is it necessary these days to always have that part?
So, as you mentioned, I've been in consumer goods for 35 years, mostly with very large companies. On top of the one you mentioned, Procter Gamble, Reckitt Benckiser, Iglo Birdseye. I've been on the board of AB InBev. I'm on the board of Kraft Heinz, on the board of Barry Callebaut, chocolate, beer, many categories. And all of these categories for many, many years have been focusing on what I said before: performance, convenience, and value. And frankly, the attention to the impact that we had, in the outside stakeholders, Mother Earth, planet, people, society, ESG, has been relatively of secondary importance. Not because there were any ill intent, but it just was not part of the economic model, for many, many years, until probably maybe I want to say 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So I've been part of that system for many years. And then at a point, about 10 years ago, starting to go on the board of these larger companies, I saw this mission-driven, this ESG, as an opportunity for this company to take a turn. And there was a lot of attention coming from the big guys. But you have to think about it, that there is a very large capital-intensive, expenditure installed in the manufacturing, in the systems, in the processes, and et cetera. So it's very difficult for a large incumbent to move away from where they've been for many years, because you have to write off equipment, you have to change your system. It's a very complicated path. So there were these new brands that were getting very keen and very activist in, eliminating plastic, no sugar, no salt, no toxic, these things. And I saw that they were really developing a different level of loyalty and emotional engagement with consumers. And that clearly spoke to the fact that the consumers were willing to embrace these mission-driven brands, and they were preferring, there was a brand preference of those brands over the big guys. That's how the Craftory was born. The Craftory was born by saying, let me invest and partner with these brands so that you can take them from 20, 30 million in sales to 100, 200, to 100, 200 million in sales. At that level, if they go to a strategics, they are big enough to make a difference and change the norm of reference for that category. We just exited Edgard & Cooper to General Mills. That's a very good example of this sort of theory. And at that time, ESG was uber important, because before it was not important at all. And then over the course of the last few years, I would say up to COVID, it was really, top of mind and fundamental for a brand to do that. The logic of the ripple effect is very clear. Everybody uses consumer goods many times a day. There is an average, I think, global is about 30 units of consumption per person per day. So all of us have, brushing your teeth, cleaning your hair, putting your creams, et cetera, et cetera. We have about 30 units of consumption per day. In the States, it's double that. Somewhere else is half that, but on average. So if you change a little bit of one category, and then you have billions of users that benefit from the little change, the ripple effect is huge. So really worth, to amplify and to grow those brands. Then what happened is that there's been a tremendous inflation, as we all know, over the last couple of years. There's been a post-COVID sort of post-traumatic syndrome. And ESG became almost like people did not prioritize as they used to prioritize before. Price, sensitivity, availability, other things came before, and therefore ESG in a way got a little bit relegated back into a different place. I think it is probably a movement that is now settling, and I think in this movement back is differentiating two types of brands: the brands that have brought that ESG mission back into the DNA of the company, of the product development, of the way you recruit, of the, whatever is social governance or environmental aspects. And those are the brands that will succeed, and it's very important. Those are the brands in which we invest, and those are the brands that consumer will recognize that they are aware and behind what matters. But it is not an activist anymore like it was, like, save the world, no single plastic type of front messaging. Is we do things responsibly. We have a DNA of responsible consumption. We look at it, whether it's diversity and inclusion, whether it is the use of plastic, whether it's the use of ingredient. We care about it, and we have it in our internal DNA. Those brands have this at their core, and so the claim they make reinforces their brand, the product. Consumers see them as authentic and real, and it will definitely play a role. Those brands that have not brought it at the core, that continues to just put it on the facade, on the front label, in a forced, inauthentic way, you recognize them because it's a brand that is about whatever hair care, and they put on the front something which is ESG but unrelated to hair care, and then you were like, what's the point? And so those brands, I think, will progressively be identified, recognized, and they will suffer from this dichotomy.
And you mentioned a little bit price sensitivity. It seems obviously like we're going through like inflation, a crisis. So obviously it's something that's really important at the moment. Like the consumer is price sensitive. So do you have any advice on building brand loyalty in an era of price sensitivity?
Yeah, which is tough. The advice is to think about loyalty and price sensitivity as you cannot reconcile them, because if a consumer buys a brand because of its price, it will buy another brand the moment that it's cheaper than brand A. So loyalty and price don't match. If you go after price, they don't go together. If you try to achieve a low price, you need to know that your loyalty will be poor. Full stop. The way to build loyalty is to actually build a premium, and to invest this premium in engaging with consumer at both an emotional and a transactional level. And what I mean by that is that brand creation over long term, is the result of two levels of engagement. Is the emotional is like, I feel beautiful because my hair are shiny and smooth. The functional is, my hair are shiny and smooth. But if you don't engage the consumers at both this level, the brand over time will fade. So in order to engage, you need to have mass communication, long-term emotional messaging, and physical and mental availability, which you find by finding those brands wherever you go to shop. So you need to be physically on the shelf, you need to be online, you need to speak that language. And then short-term transactional performance marketing, Instagram, Meta, all of that stuff, TikTok, of course, and everything else. And that short-term transaction is more about the functional bit, but it mostly reminding consumers that already bought you, already know you, to do it again. So the transactional short-term tends to repeat, and the long-term emotional tends to recruit. And the combination of these two is the one that create loyalty over time. Price will not get you there.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. And I remember when I used to work in when I used to work in a corporate consumer goods company, which was Estee Lauder companies, our CEO would always say, we don't make money by selling one foundation. We make money by selling to the same woman, repeat foundations. Given you've worked on so many different brands, and now you serve on the board of a lot of brands, you invest in brands, what would you say are like the most effective retention strategies that are working these days?
So first of all, I would not call it retention. I would call it repeat. Not to be pedantic, but because those terms of conversion, retention, etc., they are tech, digital, D2C terms, which is one little sliver of what brand creation is. So you want people to repeat the purchase, and that repetition is first and foremost a testament to your product delivery. So the always has been and always will be the most important tool to get repeats is to get a product that performs. If you have to spend $1, get it on the right formula, get it on the right delivery user experience that allows for that consumers to want to come back. The second dollar needs to be in the long-term communication that I referred to before. And only the third dollar into the transactional communication of the influencers and celebrities. So a lot of the brands I see have the unfortunate concept that the first dollars goes to the celebrity or the influencers. And then when that celebrity or influencers are sort of, passé or changed their mind or whatever is the case, then you have wasted 1, 2, 3 years you've created nothing, your brand goes away, and you're done with it. So it's product first, long-term after, short-term third.
And as you said, we see it like the Kardashians, which are obviously like the biggest influencers in the world. They've launched so many brands that haven't been able to stick around. So it's really interesting because obviously they didn't maybe focus on the product; they focused on their brand image. So it is so important, as you mentioned, to have the most amazing product, and that's why brands like Apple keep on, never do a discount, and people kind of still buy the iPhone over buying the Samsung phone. And the last decade, so in the 2010s, let's say, we've seen the rise of the D2C brands that were selling exclusively online. And they grew. But now, if you were to launch a brand, do you think launching exclusively online still works with the rising costs of shipping and online advertising and influencers? Before brands could, I remember when I was working for brands, you could just gift something to the influencer. Now the influencer wants the gift, but also you have to pay for them. The prices have gone up. So is it still possible to build just an online brand, or should founders basically focus immediately on an omni-channel retail strategy?
So no, you cannot build a new brand only D2C. Those times are gone because of the reasons that you said. And also because of the reasons that has always been there, which is you can build a brand up to a niche on D2C, but you'll never go beyond that niche, because by definition is a niche, right? It can maybe 5%, 15%, 25%, but it's never going to be 100%. So those times are gone. Cost is increased, CAC, meta changes, etc., etc. So the way that a brand should think about it is a sequential sort of series of steps to build that brand. And so it's fine to start with D2C. That allows you to learn, but it needs to be functional to the next step. So by launching on D2C, you can move faster. You can read the behavior of your consumers. You can adapt your product. You can change your communication. You can test 10 different messages and just, select the best. Now you have fantastic AI tools that actually allows you to even them to do it for you, so that you can do it even faster and even better. And so this is all fantastic, but then you need to be ready. And in the preparation of launch, you need to already have gone to Sephora if you're a beauty brand, or to whatever grocery if you're, a grocery, type of brands, and ensure that the packaging is designed to fit on that shelves, that the visibility of your logo will, match and contrast with the, key color coding and messaging of that category. That the buyer of that store will tell you that, in this category, if you do not do A, B, and C, you have no chance. So you need to start thinking about it so that when the time comes, you move to Amazon, you move to .com. Amazon is a great second step because it allows you to actually get the ranking. If you are in the ranking, whatever it is in your category in Amazon, then you go to the grocers and present that as a case. And then eventually, you're there until you reach 60, 70% of 60 or 70% of the physical availability that the category has for your average mass consumers. I'm not talking about your heavy users or your light users. I'm just talking, take the bell curve in the middle. You have to be in 60, 70% of where that consumer shop in order to have a chance to sustain a brand over time and build it. So D2C only will not get you there.
Well, thank you for that. And we talked a little bit about some metrics, like margins, obviously, some more than metrics, financial, actually indicators. Are there any other really important key financial indicators that you focus on to ensure a healthy P&L that a brand has to focus on from the get-go, that are crucial to succeed and to grow a brand, to $10 million, $100 million in sales?
Yes. So sort of in P&L order, not in order of important, but at the top, if you can command the premium pricing, it's a good indicator. It's not a bad indicator. It's difficult to maintain, but it's a good indicator because you need to have a story that supports that premium pricing. If you don't have the story and you have a premium pricing, you're dead in the water. If you have a story and you have a premium pricing and they support each other, then that might be a very good indicator. The second is the promotional level, trade spend. And it's very easy to grow when you give your product for free or halfway for free. 80% of your volume in buy one, get one free, not a good indicator. So your promotional support needs to be moderate, it needs to be appropriate, but it needs to be timed. So it cannot be every weekend in the year, because then, clearly you create basically your pricing doesn't mean anything anymore, right? So appropriate promotional spend to avoid, flooding with promotion and buy one, get one free kind of thing. Then you got, of course, the gross margin, which I commented to before, which is, the most important one. And then the other sort of two that I normally look at it is what marketing percentage can you spend as you grow. So the first year or two is disproportionate. You're small, you have to spend a minimum. So a minimum of spend in a small brand sometimes is like, whatever, it can be 100% of sales. So, that percentage doesn't mean anything. But if you project 3 years into the journey, and your P&L doesn't work with a minimum amount of marketing, call it 15%, something like that, 20%, then the P&L is not built sufficiently well, because you will need that kind of spend over the course of the coming years in order to support and grow your brands. And then the last one is fixed cost, or SG&A, basically the cost of paying the rent, paying the people, running the electricity bill. And I would say more recently, this has gone a little bit out of whack. There are small companies that set themselves up as big companies, and of course that is a big burden on the potential for growth, because profitability has always been, for a few years, has been forgotten, but now is back into being the number one value when you exit. There's no exit for a brand if it's not profitable. And the value will be a multiple of that profit, will not be a multiple of your sales. When you earn is multiple of sales, when you exit is a multiple of profit. So if that fixed cost is inflated, it's a problem.
And what's the multiple, out of curiosity now, for an exit of a consumer brand on profit? An average?
Yeah, it changes dramatically by category. Of course, I would say that the more profitable categories will probably can look at somewhere around the sort of 10 to 12. The less profitable category, if they are of the right size, can, of the right volume, if you want, can be a little bit more in terms of multiples, but they need to have a higher size to start with. So if you can have a high profitable category, maybe you can exit it when you're ready 70, 50, 70, 80 million run rates. Less profitable, larger volume categories probably will take you to 150, million before you are like, good exit.
And I mentioned it a little bit in the intro, but not a lot. Consumer is not the hot topic or the hot trend sector of the moment for VCs, which are focused on a lot of B2B. Then there was Web3. Then now it's all about AI. What would you suggest, or how can an early stage consumer brand be more attractive for investors?
Honestly, by doing everything that I said before, I don't think that the consumer is what it was hot and it's not hot. I think that the investor were wrong. I think consumer has always been very sexy to me. So consumer goods to me will not change. Every day, every consumer is everywhere in the world. From a category perspective, you cannot think of a better one or a more secular one that will always be relevant. The investors were wrong. And so with the right investors, just do the things that I said before, get the right products at the right price with the right margin, get a good story to support, and hopefully, maintain your premium, and do not over promote. If you have a USP on performance, convenience, or value, and a good founding team, you're very hot to me.
Perfect. That's encouraging. And what kind of metrics are important for a consumer at a seed stage versus maybe a Series A? When you're looking at those businesses, I know you really focus on growth, but probably people come to you as well, maybe for advice, early stage as well.
Yeah. I would say that the only thing that really changes is the repeat. When you are Series A, you want to have real evidence of repeat. If I step back, in order to make an assessment for investment, you need to have proof points that will help you to suspend your disbelief and make the jump and pay the check. Those proof points normally are around the first at that Series A is do consumer like this product enough to come back at a higher level than competition, and is the story credible? And so that's kind of really the first proof point that is super important. Then the other one I said before, it depends on the category. Do you have the right, level of advocacy or whatever that is?
What's a good percentage actually of return, would you say?
That dramatic. That depends on too many things. I cannot answer you because some people measure it like at least one purchase over the next 12 months. We measure it, in terms of month by month and returning at 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. So you get into all kinds of things, and it changes by category. But the important thing to keep in mind is every category has some norms, and you got to be at the top of those norms, because that's the number one measure. And then the other ones, that this one you cannot have it at seed, because you do not have enough data points to prove whether you are at the top of the norm or not. The other things remain the same, the gross margins, the founding team, the brand power. Sure, at the beginning, brand power will be potential, and at Series A, the brand power will already be visible. But the way you measure it is the same. The way you look at it in brand execution and consumer relevancy is the same. So I would say the one thing that changes repeat. The rest is any stage, pretty much the same.
And would you say the bar is much higher for consumer or D2C brands in general compared to other businesses?
I think so. Because it's more difficult to find and to retain a USP. In tech, look at what happened with AI, right? These things happens. It cannot change our life. In 3 months, we're all like behaving differently. It is visible. It is immediate. It was not there before. In consumers, everything is already there. I mean, there is not a consumer product that has not been invented. You name it, it exists somewhere in the world, everywhere in the world. So what you have to come up with is something that does it better, but it's very difficult to be transformational. A consumer goods that is transformational, the last time it was invented, it was many, many years ago. So you need to defend a delta that is smaller, and there is a lot of easy copy and competition because IP in consumer goods, it's almost like, non-existent. There are so many ways of going around any formulation tweaks that, nobody really spends time or money on IP very much. So the bar is high because the product difference is very difficult to maintain. And the bar is high because the unit price is very, very low. So the cost of switching is very, very low. If you switch to a brand that you don't like, you spend $5. Who cares? You go back to the previous one. It's not like a car. You get a car that you don't like, you spend 30,000, pounds or whatever. It's more annoying. So it is tough because of the nature of what we do. Yeah.
And marketing is also like a really, sometimes it's what differentiates a lot of products. I mean, there's talking about beauty, maybe because I've been in the beauty world for so long. There are thousands of brands. Most of them are going to produce in the same labs. So really the difference is the packaging, the communication, the marketing. Like, is that something that for you, it's like, do you fear that when the differentiation is only about maybe communication, packaging, and branding? Or is this how, the consumer world works? And it works in every category, right? You have private labels that produce for pet brands, for food, for most things. So like how important it is to produce your own products and really kind of differentiate your own products to maybe focusing on, the marketing and the communication.
Yeah. So, part of the answer is at the Craftory, we have not done beauty, brands until now. The reason for is that they are the borderline between sort of fashion and like you express, it's only dependent or mostly dependent on the story. We found, I worked across many categories. I define them in a little bit of a simplistic way, but the categories that are very functional. So it's stain here, stain gone, pain here, pain gone. Those categories are easier because you have a visible, provable difference that if your product makes, then you associate it with your brand, you invest in marketing behind your brand. There is a one-to-one. Consumers always remember one primary thing. People that try to put 7 messages on the front label, it's useless. I mean, consumers just get one. So if your one thing that is on the front label is associated with the pain here, pain gone, think about Nurofen, or stain here, stain gone, think about Vanish, or things like that. Those brands are very powerful because they can maintain and associate that benefit to their brand. When you get into beauty, or you get into, you know, fashion, it is much more difficult to do it, because it's almost like an expression is way more creative in a way and less functional. And so, sure, you know, a foundation will make you feel like it's working for you or not, but you know what you say is foundation is a foundation. You know, it's like, what is the fundamental difference in terms of how the brand perform? So yeah, it's more difficult, I would say, on the beauty and on the type of brands that are bordering outside of the functional benefit visibility.
And is there a category right now that you think is like really hot, that you're excited about, that maybe, you know, you think still there's an opportunity in that space for anyone who might be still at early days in their brand adventure?
Yeah, I think so. Pet has been a very interesting category for a long time, and I think it's still very interesting. All of this sort of demographic, the socioeconomic, everything is working in favor of pet. I wouldn't worry too much if a category is saturated or not, because in consumer goods, pretty much every category is saturated. 90% penetration, you know, except one or two things. So pet is very interesting. Better nutrition and health. It's very good. I mean, you can put in there some bits and supplements. You can put in there some, you know, type of, you know, food and healthy programs of sort. And you can put health as in consumer health, not RX, not medicines, you know, health. So better nutrition and health. The other one is aging population. You know, it is what it is. There's gonna be more people that are aging, even if it's aging more forcefully or more gracefully or whatever, but it is still aging. And so there are some biological elements of the human being that requires a different type of product. And I would say wellness for women, or women wellness and health, massively underrepresented for years and years. I mean, it's funny because you know, actually not funny. It is not funny, but it is not credible that so many years consumer goods have been for everybody, and clearly 50% being women. But if you take a look at all of the product testing and all of the sort of development and the performance metrics, etc., were actually on men. So the women were the responsible for purchase, but the product were developed for men. And some of the, you know, women problem, menopause, or, you know, fertility, or all kinds of stuff that is super important to be served by consumer products that is, you know, good, reliable, etc., have not yet been, I think, done for not even 25% of what it should be. So I think women wellness and health is a big one.
That's very interesting, just to get your point of view on, you know, on those key kind of categories. And in terms of you know, you mentioned some of obviously the most important factors and metrics, but is there anything else that like gets you excited, or gets you basically, you know, when you make an investment with the Craftory, like, is there anything else that you look at in terms of, you know, for an investment, maybe like a founder trait or anything else that you want to add?
The founding team, and I underline team, because one man band or one women band don't go far ever. So you need to have a founder or founders that have created a team, or that are willing to create a team, and they've shown the interest very early. I mean, we invested in some companies super early, and already had like fantastic team, because the founders realized that that's where the money has to go in order to create, you know, a brand that is relevant and future. And in the founders, we look, of course, at many things for greatness, right? You know, there are a few that I think are always important to look at. The one is the capacity to have a vision that is almost, founders can be missionaries or can be mercenaries. The mercenaries are like, I want to do this thing so that I can exit 3 years from now and be rich. We run like, you know, to the woods when we see something like that. The missionaries want to do stuff because they think is relevant. Is relevant for the company, for themselves, for the relevant. It doesn't have to be just generous for the world, but it's a relevant mission that they feel the burning desire to accomplish. And those missionary founders have the capacity to have a vision and setting the compass in the right direction where, you know, they think that they can make a difference. So that visibility of the vision is super important, number one. I would say the next one is resilience, grit, call it, you know, whatever you want, but the capacity to not stop at the obstacle, to make the obstacle be the way, to, you know, make them stronger, to look for the opportunities to learn and to develop themselves. That is an important, you know, trait that we look at. I mentioned the point about recruiting a team that is better than you at the individual areas in which, you know, you are not responsible of. And I really mean better. There is all of this sort of many theories, but this concept that A people recruit A plus and B people recruit C people. And that's the way, you know, we've seen it over and over repeating. It's an absolute truth. And then, you know, because it's this category, we look in the founders, the desire to make consumers, specifically the desire to make consumers at the center of the innovation development, to look forward in a way to please consumers. You know, if you put consumers at the center of your product development, of your system, of your organization, of your innovation pipeline, you see the way they speak. There are people that, you know, you cannot get the word consumers, you know, if you pray for it. And that's normally clearly is an indication that maybe they're in the wrong category. Yeah.
I'm going to pick a question from the audience because it's quite relevant to what we just talked about. Edo Gentili is asking, what are some of the red flags that would make you hesitant actually to invest in a consumer brand? So we talked about what you want to, what you're looking for, but is there anything that makes you run?
Yeah. Well, I have to be honest, the sort of the D2C only with the desire to prove the world wrong that it can stay D2C only, it's a big flag, and some are still believing that that's the way to go. So that normally is one. The other one is the margins. You know, we are sort of literally philosophical about it. I mean, low margins, you know, it's like can get any close. And the other one is you know, founders that are, I want to say, not good listener. They're not curious. You know, the sort of the know-it-all, the, you know, this is working because I believe it, and then, you know, maybe they can find money from whatever SoftBank or others, but, you know, clearly not from people that have things to add.
And we talk about a lot on the podcast about internationalization, because Italy is, it's like a weird country where we're around 60 million people, so it's not a small country, but it's not a huge country either. So a lot of the times we, you know, obviously we see brands that are focusing on Italy for a very long time, brands, companies, startups, not just in the consumer space. What as a, you know, you mainly invest in brands that are international brands. What is your advice for somebody starting a brand in Italy? Like, how fast should they be thinking about internationalization? Even in their communication, should they be going Italy first and then creating a community after? Should they be going immediately for an international brand that speaks to, you know, at least Europe? It's a bit trickier with the language, because I think from the UK, you launch a brand, immediately you can go to the US. When you launch in Italy or France or Spain, obviously you're with the languaging, you're a little bit limited. And I remember when I launched the brand with my sister, it's something that we really thought about so much. Like, do you compete with everybody but you're not from there in the English language? Do you focus on your home market? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.
So in answering this, I'm gonna say something and kind of, you know, put a little bit of a plug for a reality that is doing very well in Italy, in which, you know, we have invested in, which is called Scientifica. And Scientifica is an incubator, is you know, in advanced manufacturing, material, quantum, and AI. The reason why I'm saying this is I believe that, honestly, the Italian genius is a thing. You know, I'm very happy to engage with Made It and Italians in VC, etc., because I lived in 7 countries, 35 years away. And of course, bright people are everywhere, but there is this extra sort of a little bit of creativity that very often I've seen in Italian people. And I like to see the young people technology transfer, science, lab, university, to have a way to express it. So I think that starting in Italy is a good thing, because it's a way to let some of this creativity flourish and go abroad. But there are limitations, and you said some of them. What I suggest that the internationalization has to be designed in the processes at the very beginning. So you need to think about your cost of goods, your team, your systems, to be capable of doing it. So at the very, very early stage, design it as if you want to go abroad, international, but then put it in a drawers, and do not open the drawers until you have an absolute certain proof from the consumers in Italy that you have found the way to communicate, the product is right, the insight is relevant, etc. So you do all of your tick, 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 tick. You go for a period of time that is sufficient to get a visible repeat, and then you see how to apply that into the international rollout.
So like your social media, your newsletter, everything that's still in Italian. You're targeting the Italian market.
You target the Italian market. You make it a success in the Italian market. You get the repeat that you want, but then you have already designed the system to get this international. But literally just from a get ready perspective. But don't do it. Probably I would say for the first minimum 2 years. It takes time to polish, because it's a very fragile startup is a very fragile thing. If you hit a wall and it sucks out all of your liquidity, you're done. And so internationalization is very costly. For every sales that you do in another market, it costs you 3 times what it costs you in your market. So unless you have the shoulder ready and the consumer insight clear, so that you can roll it in a seamless, easy way, and don't spend that 3 times more money to prove yourself somewhere else, because it's very, very risky. What market to go to? I would say not as a first next market, the US. The US is sort of, unfortunately, the tomb of so many attempted internationalization, because you really need to be sort of very, very big and ready to lights going out. Here we go. To do it. So probably some of the neighboring, maybe Germany, maybe UK. But yeah, that's the way I would approach it.
Thank you. That's very useful. And I'm just going to open the Q&A. So we have a question from Alessandro Grampa. Hi, Elio. Can you share your view on consumer electronics market scenario as well? If you obviously consumer electronics.
Yeah, to be honest, it's kind of not a market that I look at it enough to have an opinion. So I would just say my own personal opinion, which is not that relevant.
We have a question from Jan Habat. Dear Elio, could you share your view on the oral care sector? Do you think it's investable for the Craftory?
Yes, it is. Oral care is clearly part of the very daily routine type of companies. We love categories that have, a package, a cap, and possibly 2 purchases a week. That's kind of our, golden space. So yes, oral care is one of them. It has not been really disrupted for a long time. I mean, so it is actually quite exciting. If somebody could, what is really sort of hot in that space now is all of the functional benefits. I've seen products that are working on sort of proper cure of the cavities and stuff like that. And so as you're brushing daily, you are treating, some of the problems that you have in your mouth. So functional oral care is very interesting.
And then we have a question from Stefano Di Napoli. How do you partner with companies in your portfolio? What level of involvement and what areas?
So our model is basically our team. It's about half deal team and then half craft partners. And craft partners meaning that they are expert in some of the areas like digital marketing, like supply efficiencies, innovation, strategy, the stuff that that, you know, they've done as CMO of this, CEO of that, you know, myself was CEO of company. So we have that operating experience. So the way we partner is that we take positions that tend to be between 30 and 60% of the company, meaningful minority to majority. And then clearly board governance and representation in line with that position. But the board interaction is only one of the way we do that. The main value is delivered by the craft partner interacting with our portfolio companies when they need it on topics that are, you know, important to solve. And so we never do the job ourselves. It's always like, you know, experts that come to the companies and sit with them and share. We're very clear. We're very strong on playbooks, on protocols, on routines, on ways to approach things. You know, there's many years of experience that help us to be effective and efficient in our interaction with our portfolio companies. And you know, those that have told us what they think normally is positive. So it looks like it's working.
So if there's any other question, please ask. But I do actually have another question for you in the meantime, Elio, because the Craftory is actually, you were saying it's not a proper VC fund, right? You're different than a VC fund. So maybe can you mention in what ways you're different? Maybe you're more long-term, just anything that sets you apart from just like a regular VC.
Yeah, let's say that the main difference is that we are permanent capital. When we did this 6 years ago, it was quite unusual. Now there are a couple of others sort of evergreen sleeves, you know, out of the bigger fund. We did it like that because brands have a life on their own, and they require a certain amount of years and time in order to prove themselves. So if a VC owns a brand or private equity owns a brand and impose their fund cycle into it, you might find yourself that at the 4th year of life of your brand, or the 5th year of life of your brand, you go through a sale process. It might kind of take the sales out of the, you know, the wind out of the sails. It might take momentum out. It might confuse people and so on. So we wanted to not impose our financial cycle over the brand cycle. And so we are long-term, as long as is required to get the brand to the point at which it can be IPO'd, sold, part of the strategics that, you know, will benefit from it, without having the time constraints. So that's, I would say, is the main difference, on top of the one about being operators as well as, you know, deal team.
And you invest in growth, mainly brands. So usually when they're about, is it 10 to 20 million in sale? Like what's the minimum sort of?
We look at 10 like small. It's more like sort of 20 plus is what we like. But, you know, we look also if it is 10, but 20 plus is what we like. Maybe up to 20 to 40 million in sales is probably a good range, you know, run rate to enter for us.
And would you ever look at smaller brands, or like maybe even as an angel investor separate from the Craftory? Is that something that you're interested in, or your focus is mainly growth?
The focus is there, yeah.
Okay. We have actually another question from Alberto Massa. How would you personally approach expansion in the US? Would you partner up with a local player? So I know you did mention that the US, it can be a graveyard for a lot of brands, but
yes. Of course, it's also the most exciting and the largest and, you know, huge opportunity. So you want to think about the US, and if you want to have a unicorn, if you want to have a big chunk of, you know, cash type of exit, you got to be in the US. So it's a good question. It depends again there on you know, the category very much, but also the model that you have. But I would not partner with another commercial partner. I would certainly partner with the whole sort of supply chain. You need to have a local supply chain. You need to have local experts. And I would partner with a distributors, as in Salesforce, not as in marketing and sales. If you want to succeed in the US, you need to own, and you need to be incredibly methodical about building your brand as different than others. And because there are a million others in every category, it's a really tough job. So you need to have you know, a US team that is your US team in one of the big markets where you're going to roll out, and place your, you know, ideally you want to place your headquarters there. A couple of times, you know, we asked companies that we invested in, if you want to go to the US, you move your headquarters from whatever country you have to the US. and then you leave in your country behind. In this case, if it is an Italian, you leave behind your Italian team, but you as the founder or whatever, you move to the US, you set up your team there, and from there you manage your distributor, your third-party manufacturers, your logistic providers. It's a big challenge, and it's got to be taken by the best placed people in a company, which normally speaking is the CEO and the founding team.
Elio, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to all of us. It's been such an insightful masterclass. As somebody who also works in consumer, I've learned so much from everything you shared. So I really want to thank you on behalf of everybody listening, and really hope that everybody has found this valuable. So thank you so much for having been on the masterclass series.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.